and the birth of Pharisees in all of its negative connotation was born. Oh. Hello and welcome to Worm's Podcast. My name is Hee-Jae, and let's talk about the Bible. So today I decided to move on in a faster pace, and today we're going to talk about the Good Samaritan and what Samaritan means to the Jewish people, to the Israelites at that time. If you read in the Old Testament, the two countries, Judah and Israel, were divided in two after King Solomon. And after that, the two countries were separately conquered by world powers, the Assyrians and the Babylonians. Now the north, Israel, was conquered before Judah. And later on, Babylon conquered Judah and took a lot of the population back to Babylon. Now during their exile in Babylon, the Jewish people were allowed to stay in Jewish communities, preserving their purity, quote unquote. The problem is, there were people left behind. Yikes, I did it again. There were the old Israelites, and there were actually some Jewish people left behind. And they intermarried with the local people, and their blood was diluted by the surrounding communities. Now we have to consider the mindset of the people who were taken to Babylon. And by the time that they returned to Israel to rebuild the temple, they were focused onto something. And that focus was on the law. Because if you read 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, the Chronicles, and all the books talking about the kings of Israel and Judah, you would notice that to every single monarchy, the writer, probably Ezra and Nehemiah, talks about how that king was a good king or a bad king in the eyes of God. The deciding factor of whether or not these kings were good or bad was based on the fact that if they rebuilt the temple. The focus of the writers of 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, the Chronicles, was based on the temple, based on the act of worship. And from there, their devotion to the temple, instead of what God intended for the laws to be in our relationship with Him and our relationship with our fellow neighbors, was lost. And the birth of Pharisees in all of its negative connotation was born. So from the time that their temple was built and until the time of Jesus, their focus was not on following the law, but instead their mentality was how not to disobey the law. They were afraid of being conquered again. And guess what? Rome conquered them. And so after the conquest by the Roman Empire, they would have been refocused to the teachings of the Bible and their pious need to follow them. So a new set of laws were laid upon the old law so that they would not disobey the law. Instead of keeping the law, they would not disobey the law. And during this time, from the return from Babylon all the way up to the time of Jesus, they looked down upon the people of Samaria, thinking them as traitors to God. They did not keep pure. They were not pious towards God. And because of this, there was actually conflict going on between these people, and they were sworn enemies towards each other. On the other hand, the Jewish people became more pious in their following of these set of laws so that they would not disobey God. For over hundreds of years, they have developed a system that made them think that they knew what God's heart was. But instead, what happened was, now brothers are at war with each other. They hated Samaritans. They blamed this conquest on them. They blamed a lot of things that the Samaritans were not responsible for. And in turn, the Samaritans, because of this long-lasting conflict, were at odds with the Israelites. Now, with the intention of the lawyer standing up asking, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus strips the person laying on the ground of all of his identity and brings in a Samaritan. And he explains the intent of God in the laws. No longer trying to not disobey the law, but instead listening to what God's heart is. This is how we do our Bible study, examining the culture, the social structure, the history, and getting to the intent and the meaning of what Jesus is trying to tell us through Luke. So come along for the ride, subscribe, leave a comment below, hit that like button. It's easier than the skip button. And I'll see you guys on the other side. Bye bye.